Meeting today, we have our forum. And
Museum, but
100%.
Chelsea.
Yeah, so I can get everybody's, I didn't bring my gavel.
I know we.
My whistle.
I need to.
Okay, but I'd like to welcome you all here. First thing, I hope you enjoyed the new platform that you got to get your information on today. Now, we're going to go through our normal procedure of introductions, and I'm going to make it just a little bit different today. I want you to tell me in one sentence, a project that you're working on in preservation that is exciting. Because we need as much excitement in this room as possible. And I'm going to put each one of you on the spot. You should be doing something in the area of preservation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Fred Belden, Raleigh. I'm an architect. Exciting preservation project. I would say we are working in the city of Wilmington on a 1940s industrial laundry building that converted into a music hall and food hall.
Wow.
Space.
Okay.
David Murstone, Winston-Salem, Historic Preservations. My wife and I are working to save Sam the Dot Man, the African-American folk artist who passed away, and trying to save his store building, which he is decorative painted inside and out. So working to save it and make a community space again, arts.
It's something I'd like to see.
We're going to try and have an open house this month.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Tamara Holmes Brothers, Knightdale and Fayetteville, Cumberland County. Actually, Broadale will be presented today. So that was probably a 4-year effort. It originally started in 2010 when I did the unofficial study. So that was used to apply for a city grant in Fayetteville to acquire the consultants that will be presented today. So excited about that and seeing that come to fruition.
My name is Newell Clark. I am, we've got a former mayor of the city of Lexington. So I was preserving the whole town.
You get it?
But actually, I've got a personal project that since I'll lift this up. My business that I do is property management, that sort of thing. I have got some business partners and we are currently renovating an old textile mill that we are creating some living space in the uptown area of Lexington that will be near our depot project that we were working on as a community, as a city, connecting to Amtrak pretty soon. So that whole area was an old defunct factory space. So we are bringing back some apartments. So I'm putting my own personal money into some of the things I was pushing the community to do as well. But I'm real excited about that project and learning a lot about it too. When you start going into a phase 2 study and everything else, you start learning stuff from like the 1800s, and we're sharing that with the community of what all that space was. So, yes, ma'am. That was more than a sentence.
Oh, that's fine.
We're calling the tech folks and trying to get them to come.
You will find when you start talking about preservation, you can't do it in a sentence. So that was a goal, but it's not mandatory. Dr. Nard?
Okay, I'm Dave Denard, retired from East Carolina University History Department. And I'm working on a biography of a local leader there named D.D. Garrett. And that prompted me to rejoin the Greenville Historic Preservation Commission so that we would pay more attention to preserving some of the historic properties. This person's house got away from us, but maybe the person who purchased it will, since I have most of his papers and some other stuff, will be able to work out something so that house will somehow, remain in the public domain, Yeah. Okay, that's the objective.
Hi, my name's Mary Beth Fitz, and I'm a research archaeologist at the Research Office of Archaeology at UNC Chapel Hill. I'll just go with the thing I'm doing tomorrow morning, which is working with a graduate student and my new colleague, Dr. John Marcoux, to do ground penetrating radar on UNC's historic campus to trace out stone drains that were installed in the 1830s
There was no drainage system at that point. And one of the professors at that time, Elisha Mitchell, talked to the university president about having, of course, enslaved, persons build these. So they are one of the vestiges of the campus that was, directly constructed by enslaved labor, but they also show this relationship between the university and the town because they were infrastructure used by both the town and the gown in the early development of the university.
Tough one to follow. My name is Josie Ward. I'm a preservation consultant in Asheville. And in my role on the board of the Preservation Society of Asheville and Buncombe County, we are working to convert a historically African-American church and an adjacent house into affordable housing that had been slated for demolition. And we're discovering whether or not we can make that a business model because it's proving to be very difficult, but a worthy challenge, we believe.
A very worthy project.
I am Sean Patch. I'm an archaeologist with New South Associates in Greensboro. And I've been working on my own time for a while with a property owner in Granville County on an enslaved African-American cemetery that I also discussed with staff. I'd like to bring that forward to the study list at some point and then potentially pursue a nomination. So it's something, it's a long-term project, but we'll discuss it with staff.
I'm Joe Opperman. I'm a historical architect, and the project that's most uppermost in my mind right now is Lone Pine Reservoir, which is the original reservoir for Biltmore Estate, which I'm due to go inspect in 2 weeks. And reading the weather reports this morning, it's supposed to be snowing and 20 degrees.
You have to suffer for your passion.
I'll put it off a little bit, which is what I'm requesting.
I'm Valerie Ann Johnson from Granville County, and I think the folks took a suggestion and to get in touch with you. I'm thinking, and so we'll have to talk some more about that cemetery because there's some folks who can give you oral history about it. That would be great. Other than that, seem to be preservation all things this week. I serve as chair of the Board for Preservation North Carolina. So one of the things, it may steal y'all's thunder a little bit, but I'm just excited about the Thomas Day property. And it was an effort by so many different folks represented around this table to bring that into a state historic site. So that's my excitement. I can't wait to go to the open.
On the 29th, right?
Yes.
29th of this month.
You can just introduce yourself.
Okay. I was gonna say.
No, just tell them who you are.
Oh, one more thing. I owe Barbara, saying this out loud, I owe Barbara a letter.
Yes, you do. It's on the minutes. You have to get me a letter.
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ramona Bartos. I'm the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer. I'll just say
No.
my project though is the statewide preservation plan. I'll tell you about it.
Yeah.
Dr. Waters.
And I'm Darren Waters, Deputy Secretary for Archives and History and State Historic Preservation Officer.
My name is Barbara Snowden and I chair this committee. My project that I'm working on now is a 1857 jail that we have saved and gone through the phase 1 of stabilizing it. And we're now in the process of trying to figure out how we're going to use that building for the public in the area. My personal problem is having 6 historic buildings and pay for them on a retired teacher's salary. So that is an ongoing problem. Okay, now I'm just going to ask the people around the room if they'd introduce themselves. Most of you we know, but we want to make sure we put a name with a face. Starting there.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jeff Smith. I'm the National Register Coordinator.
Good morning, I'm Lauren Poole. I'm the Historic Preservation Specialist oversees the survey National Register program in the East. I'm Hannah Beckman Black. I'm the Preservation Specialist based in the Western Regional Office in Nashville. I'm Beth King. I'm the Architectural Surveying Coordinator for the state, and I'm also based in Nashville. I'm Rebecca Spanbauer. I'm an Architectural Survey Specialist, and I'm here in Maryland.
Morning, I'm Julie Smith, National Register and Survey Specialist based here in Maryland.
Now, Mitch Wiles, I'm head of the Restoration Services branch based here in Raleigh.
Sarah Woodard, branch supervisor for the survey and National Register branch here in Raleigh.
And Kelly Malloy, I'm an architectural survey specialist working with the Hurricane Grant Program here in Raleigh.
And I'm Sharon Hope. I'm here in Raleigh. I'm the National Register Program Assistant.
Gail Hallberg, I'm historic preservation consultant with Commonwealth Preservation Group.
I am Lillian Candela. I'm an architect and architectural historian consultant, Kramer Design Group. I'm here today from Detroit, so happy to join.
Hi, everyone. My name is James Stevens. I'm the environmental review archivist. I manage the environmental review and National Register Library.
I'm Emily Miller. I work here in the file room. I'm the file room assistant for the archives and I'm Amanda Langlois, and I'm a brand new architectural file room just started a week ago.
Well, we're glad to have you.
you.
Right now, I'm going to defer from my schedule because I know Dr. Waters has some things going on today, so I'm going to let him go first.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. And again, thank you all for being here. I told Ramona today that I always begin these comments with thanking you all for being part of this committee, because we have to make decisions on filling seats, and this is not, I think, quick work to do. I mean, you put a lot of time and dedication into this, so I do deeply appreciate that. And so I hope that doesn't seem perfunctory when I say it. I want to say the same thing to the staff too. This is a remarkable team. They do a lot of work and get a lot done. I think I'm still amazed at how much they get done. I saw Jeff and a few here late last night after hours trying to get set up. So that is not lost on us. I hope you all realize that, deeply appreciate that work that you all do. There's a lot going on in the Office of Archives and History. Many of you know about America 250 planning. I think we have robust planning going on here as far as the state is concerned. I think Ramona might say something different about our national friends and what they're doing. That's a little, that's a whole nother story there, but we have robust planning going on here. And so I'm proud that, to say that, and Ramona may say more. We're also in the middle of budget planning for the short session of the General Assembly. And I will say again, I want to just recognize Sean Patch. Sean has come in and had a couple of conversations with me and Ramona. And to thank Dr. Denard and also Dr. Valerie Johnson for the work that they're doing as members of the Historical Commission as well, to try to raise the visibility of the needs across the Office of Archives and History. And especially for this particular division, the Division of Historic Resources, and for SHPO, there are real needs in this particular division. And I'm happy to say that the department recognizes that, and we are advocating for, new budget resources for this division in the form of especially hands on deck. We need more people because I think the demands on this team continues to increase. So the governor's budget last year did include new positions for Historic Resources Division, for the Office of State Archaeology, and for SHPO. It did not make it into the final budget, but we're going back again this time. And so it is high on our list of priorities of what we need. And Sean has talked to us about how he might be able to be an advocate out there for these things. And what we have said is that our strategy has been to, if you're interested, and this is the same with the Historical Commission as well, to provide you with talking points of things that you might be able to talk to those who might have some influence to get these things high. And I also want to recognize I met our chairwoman here for her work as a member of the Historical Commission as well, to really push hard for this. I also want to thank Sarah Woodard and the team together for a project that they have brought to us to begin to hopefully digitize the records of the State Historic Preservation Office. We need to do that. I mean, Ramona may say more about that. We've been talking about that. I really believe it's an accessibility issue as well for people. I've had good conversations with the secretary about this. We are putting forward a budget ask for this. It may not be for all of the money, but we've been talking about how we might be able to scale this project. This is something that Sarah brought to our attention working with Ramona. And so I'm happy to say that we are having real conversations about this with the secretary, and we are going to make a budget ask for money to actually begin that project. Ramona and I will be traveling to Washington. I think last year we said during Preservation Advocacy Week that on one day, we walked 7 miles, I
Yes.
think, in just one day. So I'm getting my walking shoes together to do that again. We will be doing that the first weekend in March. So that is coming up, just to let you know that. I think that's just about all I have this to go around. And again, thank you all for your commitment to this work. I really do appreciate it. And I hope that that is not missed and it doesn't seem perfunctory when I say that. But thank you all so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Ramona?
All right, thank you very much. And I'll use that as a segue to just elaborate on a few things. But first of all, I'd like to welcome, we have 2 new members of the committee, and Dr. Mary Beth Fitz, who we know very well. She was formerly with the Office of State Archaeology in her career path, and also Mayor Clark has joined us, also a member of the statewide historical commission. So we're very appreciative of all of you, but especially new members who have stepped up to participate and give us the advice we need. I also want to echo Dr. Waters' thanks. The fruits of the labor of our team is what's before you to review, and all of our consultant partners as well, and our constituents. This is a very grassroots oriented system that we have here. And again, I just want to thank all of you, to acknowledge our staff, because none of this would have come to fruition without their hard work. And they do work hard, I can tell you, through sickness and all of that as well. I also want to welcome David Stevens, you had introduced, as well as Amanda Langlois, and they have just recently joined us just since the beginning of the year. So we're thrilled to have them as part of our team as well. The digitization project, if you haven't been in the basement, those are all our almost 150,000 individual files about historic places in North Carolina, and they have not been digitized. And so it is an accessibility issue. It's also, frankly, we need the backup. And also we want to be in the vanguard of states that have those available online, that anybody anywhere can look at those and use those. And we'll still be able to do all of what we need to do. The budget ask is for 4 positions. We'll see how that plays out. One is an environmental review branch. We have a tremendous demand for that work. A restoration specialist as well, and Office of State Archaeology, a person to help Emily McDowell, who's our lab supervisor, with our NAGPRA fulfillment. And also an archaeological technician to help with the cemetery program. I tell you, that is unbelievable, the constituent demand, which is very heartening to see. Real quickly, I just want to flag for you, everyone here received an invitation to our listening sessions for our statewide preservation plan. We very much would like you to join in with your regional colleagues and partners in preservation. We've done a survey that's still out there. If you haven't taken that, we can get that to you as well. And so then next month, we're going to start looking at results of what we have heard as feedback and start developing that plan, which will then go to the Historical Commission for your benefit and your approval ultimately, and then to the Park Service. So that's a big lift we're doing right now. And Christy Brantley is listening in. She's our local government coordinator. She and I are the tag team for that. I'm very appreciative of her work. The other thing I just want to mention, y'all, I'll pass this around, in this month's, or this quarter, I should say, Preservation Magazine from the National Trust, we were really thrilled to have a multi-page, beautiful beauty spread article about Revolution Mill in Greensboro, which, if you had been on this committee before, you knew came through the National Register work and then became a huge mixed use project with a lot of resiliency built into it because it sits on top of a creek and a floodplain. So it's a very complex project, and Eddie Bell, architect from Durham, has been involved with that. So I'll just pass that around and y'all can look at that, but not get distracted from your work. Yeah. All right. But again, I'm thrilled to see everyone and appreciate everyone being here. It's wonderful to see you in person.
Chair? All right. My next question, is there any conflict of interest that needs to be stated at this time? On any of the projects that we're going to be looking at today? Hearing none, we'll go on to the minutes. Are there any corrections? Minutes? Do I have a motion to approve them?
I move approval.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. They approved. Okay.
Madam Chair, if folks could, even though we're recording this, if folks could identify themselves,
Okay.
make a motion, that would be very helpful for our scribe and our minutes preparation in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're now ready to start looking at National Register properties, but I have one personal thing that I need to say. If any of you received an email from me yesterday, please delete that. I got hacked, and they seem to have concentrated the hacks on the people who work for the Department of Archives and History, because I got Parker called me first, and then Ainsley called me, and I've had 2 or 3 people this morning said, "Did you send me an email yesterday?" So they may have gotten your name from this committee, so please.
Madam Chair, we might let our IT folks know that.
Yes, I think Parker did. I do not know that, but I'll check before I leave. All right. Betty?
Thank you all for being here this morning. We will kick it off with the Samuel and Jesse Childs House located in Henderson County. So it's a little bit, there we go. All right. Henderson County, of course, is in the southwestern part of the state. And the house itself is just west of the core of Hendersonville. Samuel Childs was born in Boston, Massachusetts in 1874, and by 1920, he lived in Pennsylvania with his wife, Jessie, and their 3 sons. Sometime after 1920, the Childs family began splitting time between St. Petersburg, Florida, and Henderson County. In 1922, Samuel Childs purchased approximately 21 acres in Henderson County. It was the first of several purchases, and it's here that he commissioned this home, and he developed Brightwater Farm and Brightwater Resort. The farm was located on land to the south of the Childs house. The farm was a family affair, with his children undertaking most of the farming operations and management, while Samuel focused on real estate development in the Brightwater Summer Resort. The resort development, highlighted here in green, is the study listed area with the pin in the individual house, spread out to the north across Brevard Road. The farm to the south of the house, you can see the streets behind the house, is now partially developed and still partially farmed. In the resort development, most of the individual cottages are extant and part of this study listed district. As I give you some background about the Childs family and their Brightwater projects, I'll move around the exterior of the house and through the interior. Childs was one of many Henderson County developers with Florida connections who lived at least part-time in Henderson County and developed residential retreats for Floridians seeking relief from the Sunshine State's summers. Brightwater Resort initially included only individual cottages executed in rustic designs, but Childs added a lodge, dining hall, guest house, and communal recreation areas like tennis courts, lawn bowling, and a game room, all before World War II. Brightwater Farm supplied the dining hall with eggs, produce, and meat. By 1940, Childs lived in Henderson County full-time in this house with his wife and children, and he now by this point, had the 3 sons plus a daughter. The census recorded his occupation as a developer of communities, and he maintained a resort and farm office inside the house. The 1950 census noted that Childs, at that point, age 77, was unable to work, and he died in 1962. Jesse Childs remained in the house until 1976, after which time the house started passing through a number of different owners. The Samuel and Jesse Childs house is an example of craftsman design And this front corner was his office space. You can see the little side door, entrance into that. With a nod to colonial revival style seen in the front door composition. The craftsman style emerged from the arts and crafts movement of the late 19th century as a reaction to Victorian era ornamentation. The Child's House is a regionally specific interpretation of the craftsman style, and it draws from naturalistic or organic architecture that blended well into the surrounding mountain landscape. These southwestern North Carolina mountain houses often used log or stone as the primary building materials, and they linked the home's design to the landscape through stylistically related hardscape elements. This is evident at the Child's House, where stone walkways, walls, and pathways tie the house to the landscape and its surroundings. The home's builders were local men who worked throughout Hendersonville and within the Brightwaters Resort. They teamed up on projects, but also worked separately with other builders and craftsmen on various projects. Irvin Anders was the builder. He was again a Hendersonville native. And in 1922, he had joined up with two other men to form a real estate company. Anders worked in both real estate and as a contractor throughout the mid-20th century. The stonemason was named Lee Dwight Wright, also a Hendersonville native. Wright's father and brothers were also masons who worked in the region. The three oldest of the Wright sons, so Lee Wright's older brothers, are responsible for the extensive stonework on the campus of Brevard College. Anders and Wright both died in the 1980s, and several of their houses are extant. The Samuel James and Jesse McCune Child's House embodies the characteristics of the locally significant architectural history of 1920s residential design in Henderson County. The house is recommended for listing in the register under criterion C in the area of architecture, with a period of significance limited to the year of construction, 1923. Any questions?
First, the windows. on the north and south elevations. And these are some interior shots. But the daylight is ample, to say the least. This is facing west, and this is actually facing north. And I think I may have said this in my study list presentation, but for those not present, on the day that I made a site visit, which was March of last year, we could actually see Pilot Mountain from the 8th floor. It was, the sky was so clear, and it has such a presence. So this is the 8th floor, which is where the executives would have had their offices. There are more fixed partitions in place, but again, restrooms, stairwells, elevators. This set of double wood doors is located here. This goes into a former meeting space. But again, these are office spaces. Basically what's intact are your acoustical ceiling tile systems, which oddly or funnily enough, the National Park System Technical Preservation Services is now considering those historic. Anyway, and then, the basic partition walls are drywall, no plaster was involved, but these are the elevators. But there are some, there's some woodwork surrounds, which you wouldn't have seen on the other floors. So that's the end of my presentation. One Plaza Center is recommended for the National Register of Historic Places under criteria A and C for community planning and development in the form of urban renewal and architecture, respectively. The period of significance begins in 1970 and goes through 1974, which encompasses the building's period of development, construction, and opening. Consultation with the state's Office of State Archaeology they did not recommend archaeological potential. Yes.
I have a question, which may be for you or maybe for Kayla, but I wouldn't have described this building as brutalist. And I wondered if that was a style designation that came from Peace Jr. himself, or the tapered pilotis and the just general refinement look more straight modernist to me. It's a query.
I guess I'm still learning the style, quite honestly. So the more I see of it, I mean, this was kind of a forerunner in High Point's landscape as far as modern architecture goes. I guess I see brutalist as just being very pared down, but and it's got the aggregate panels, which are usually in place for brutalist style architecture, if not just large slabs of concrete. I mean, I'm certainly flexible. We'll see ultimately what the Park Service has to say, but duly noted, Josie, thank you.
Just add, I think I kind of agree, there's like when you said blend and style going on, so looking like materiality, sort of like massive create. The east and west elevation, I do see some influences of like international style with the base and windows. So I agree, it's kind of what falls somewhere in between for sure.
They're not clear lines.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to find hot style, at least, in this landscape for that relatively early period, but.
I will say when we resurveyed downtown Greensboro, maybe 4 years ago, that we did a lot of the buildings that had aged in or were aging in, like that 7 of like a late corporate version of international and brutalist elements. So I think there's a lot of precedent in the region and in the state for those two things, like people just not liking brutalist enough to stick to it. And so making it a little more palatable to everyone else by that late, inexpensive version of the international style.
I think one of the more unique aspects of the design were on the entrance. You could kind of see there was, I don't know, I'll use the word pylon for lack of a better word, but just a vertical support where they were 90 degrees flush with the exterior, but then on the interior, they were angled or canted. So some visual interest is certainly there. But again, I think it would just, ornamentation was just not, I guess the lack thereof was maybe what made it, what it was. But I think there's still a lot we need to learn about
that particular niche of modern architecture.
Sure. Thanks.
Jeff, I'd like a comment if you don't mind. I find it, just for me, ironic that a building that was built as a result of urban renewal, we got urban renewal funding. And as a result of urban renewal, we have the National Historic Preservation Act and the National Register, and yet here we are 50 years later commemorating a building that wouldn't be there were it not for urban renewal. So I don't have an argument.
There's anything wrong with that.
Didn't look like Blake.
No, so, think of it as a tombstone.
Only a comment, yeah. Only a comment.
I get it.
Other comments?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
You're welcome.
Have the last National Register nomination for you all today. This is the Warrenton Historic District additional documentation, boundary increase, and boundary decrease. And Sarah Woodard surveyed Warrenton in 2018, adding a boundary increase and decrease to the study list in 2019. The district is located in the Warren County seat of Warrenton and was originally listed in 1976. With boundaries shown outlined here in blue, the original nomination concentrated on the town's earliest residential and commercial development with a specific focus on Warrenton's antebellum history. This is the original National Register boundary map. So the boundaries of the town are shown kind of in this more straight line on the outer edge of the map, and then the National Register boundaries are this dotted kind of line around here. The National Register boundary was primarily limited to resources within the town boundary at the time. So areas like the Hill, which was a neighborhood along Franklin Street, which is right here, and then extending west off the map, traditionally associated with Warrenton's African-American community, were not included at the time. Warrenton was established in 1779 as the county seat and became the economic, governmental, educational, and social center of an agricultural region dependent on tobacco and cotton markets. The district was listed with significance under criterion A in the areas of commerce, education, politics and government, law, and social history. It was also listed under criterion C for architecture due to the exceptional quality and variety of architectural styles spanning from the late 1700s to the early 1900s. The town is particularly notable for its collection of Greek Revival and Italianate buildings by locally prominent antebellum architect and builder Jacob Holt. The boundaries contain one individually listed property, the Coleman White House, which was listed in 1973, significant at the state level for architecture. And though the 1976 nomination form included landscape architecture and religion as areas of significance and indicated that the district was significant at the statewide level, there was no supporting information or context provided in the nomination to support these claims. The original period of significance was not clearly defined, but presumably begins circa 1783 with the construction of the Peter Davis store, the oldest extant building in the district, and ends in 1926 based on the 50-year age evaluation. However, the town continued to grow and develop into the mid-20th century, both inside and outside of the district boundaries. This nomination provides additional documentation to update the 1976 district, a boundary increase in 5 areas shown on the map here in green to include early to mid-20th century buildings and historically African-American resources. It also includes 4 boundary decrease areas shown in red to remove vacant lots and a few later buildings. The newly proposed boundaries and added context more accurately reflect the full scope of 20th century building trends, as well as the contributions of Warrenton's African-American residents to the continued growth during that time. The additional documentation provides context in the areas of African-American ethnic heritage and social history. Warrenton's early prosperity relied on slavery, and prior to the Civil War, the population of enslaved African Americans outnumbered the white population in the county. Following emancipation, neighborhoods developed around newly constructed Black churches and schools and continued to grow into the mid-20th century. African Americans in the county organized civil rights demonstrations in Warrenton, boycotting schools and businesses in the 1960s. Schools were ordered to integrate in 1969, but continued racial discrimination caused further conflict in the 1970 to 71 school year. The revised period of significance for the additional documentation extends to 1971 to encompass those events. The additional documentation also provides historic background and context to support continued significance in the areas of architecture and commerce through 1971. Warrenton's downtown expanded and remained a significant center of commerce for the county during that period. The original nomination gave thorough context for the Georgian, Federal, Greek Revival, and Italianate styles, but the additional documentation provides more thorough context for other styles in the district, including Gothic Revival, Queen Anne, Classical Revival, Colonial Revival, Craftsman, Period Cottages, Minimal Traditional, Ranch, and Modernist styles, as well as early and mid 20th century vernacular commercial and residential buildings. The additional documentation serves to correct the original nomination by removing the statewide level of significance for the district and removes landscape architecture and religion as areas of significance. However, due to the statewide significance claim of the Coleman White House, statewide significance remains checked on the form. The additional nomination includes an inventory with detailed property descriptions, revised contributing and non-contributing statuses, and accounts for any new builds or demolitions since the 1976 nomination. The revised resource count for the additional documentation includes 237 primary contributing resources and 39 primary non-contributing resources. The boundary increase includes an inventory for 141 primary contributing resources and 22 primary non-contributing resources. Buildings in the boundary increase illustrate the continued evolution of Warrenton through the mid-20th century and share history and significance with the existing district in the areas of architecture, African-American ethnic heritage, education, and social history. Boundary increase areas feature a narrower range of styles, including Colonial Revival, Craftsman, Period Cottages, Minimal Traditional, and Ranch. And the period of significance extends from circa 1890, the beginning of concentrated development in the boundary increase, to 1969, corresponding to school desegregation. Looking at each increase area, the largest area is Area A, which includes planned early to mid 20th century residential development to the north and historically African-American resources along West Franklin Street. It includes Hawkins Elementary School, which opened in 1911, and followed by the 1925 Rosenwald-funded J.R. Hawkins High School. The school taught Black students K through 12, and the complex continued to grow into the 1960s, adding a teacher's home, new classroom buildings, vocational buildings, and a gymnasium. And while the high school building is no longer extant, Several of the classroom buildings remain to convey that educational significance. Area A also includes the only individually listed property in the boundary increase, the Sledge Haley House, listed in 1980. It's locally significant under criterion A for African American ethnic heritage as the home of Paul Haley, a prominent local educator and leader of Warrenton's Black community. And it's also listed under criterion C for architecture. Area B encompasses early to mid 20th century homes. Area C is a pair of mid 20th century commercial buildings, one of which pictured here operated as an African American funeral home. Area D includes houses dating from the late 19th to mid 20th centuries. And Area E includes 5 mid 20th century houses. This document also includes 4 boundary decrease areas. Area A removes vacant land due to demolitions, as well as 3 historic structures that are now unfortunately separated by vacant land. Areas B and D remove vacant land, while Area C removes vacant land and incompatible later development. Buildings that remain outside of the boundaries were not included because they were constructed later than the historic period. They were separated from the contiguous district by large vacant lots or were highly altered. Overall, resources in the original boundary and the increase areas have very good historic integrity. So here is a summary slide of each action, and I know there's a lot going on. So if you have any questions, I'm here to answer.
Questions?
I'm glad. I was, the statewide or not was confusing in how it's described. So the check is simply a technical thing that there's one resource
Yes,
that makes it all statewide.
because there is one previously listed resource that is of statewide significance, the form needs to have the check for statewide significance. But it also has a check for local significance because the district as a whole is locally significant.
But that wasn't totally clear. So
Okay.
maybe needs to be.
Okay, we'll double check that on the form and make sure
Just
that
No, I
is
mean, just in the description, it wasn't.
right.
It says, oh, we're eliminating that, but then it's still checked.
Okay, I will,
Property, it's just.
yes. Yeah, I will be sure that that is clear in the description.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Thank you.
And I have a broad question for you.
Okay.
In terms of the historical significance of this boundary increase
Mhm.
and what it does in terms of addressing the lack of visibility of African American architectural history in these areas. Okay, and I guess Ramona could chime in on this too, because I came in when we were discussing infield, and the question was raised that, Enfield had a relatively large African-American population. And in that historic district that had been carved out, they had been, the African-American population had been virtually excluded. And, one of the residents called in did write a response to that. And I wonder if this is something that could be used, this boundary increase, as a corrective for a place such as Enfield.
I'm gonna bring Sarah in the conversation too, because Sarah's familiar with both Warrenton and Enfield. And I'm thinking part of what was working here was connectivity in terms of what could be connected to sort of the main frame, so to speak, of what was already identified. But Sarah, do you want to talk about an Enfield? We don't have before us today, as we know, but.
Yeah, so sometimes projects are bound by what people bring to us, what they what whoever is interested in. Warrenton came, partly from our office and partly from the town of Warrenton being interested in updating their nomination. Because they do have a number of tax credit projects that happen there, which, we don't talk about tax credit projects, but that was something the town was interested in doing. And, like Enfield, Warrenton has, currently and historically a high proportion of African American citizens. And the way we're gonna look at districts now is a lot more inclusive. So very quickly it became apparent that Warrenton already had some African American neighborhoods included within that original district boundary, but particularly off to the west down Franklin Street. Visually, when you're on the ground, there's a little bit of a separation. There's sort of some vacant land. And that was at first kind of what should we do? We've got this vacant land. We don't really want to hop across it. The Park Service kind of frown. Park Service seems to be shifting a bit on that, being a little more flexible about that, which I think will overarchingly help the whole National Register program be a lot more inclusive as it makes a district. And we debated whether to address the area along Franklin Street as its own separate district, which probably historically is more what we do, or to do it because it shares a history with all of Warrenton, do it as a discontiguous district, so we have to include these empty lots. The consultant in the case, when it finally came down to doing the nomination, decided to include the vacant lots. I think it's gonna work fine. We'll see if the Park Service has a problem with it. They certainly over the last, I don't know, Jeff, what year or so have started to indicate a lot more flexibility on including vacant lots or non-contributing resources that would really help us reach out and pull in a whole community.
Right, and I think one difference too between how Warrenton was set up originally, it was sort of more of a, let's grab as much in town as we could, but there were still missing pieces. I think Enfield, the difference, the town, again, it has to do a lot with the town's interest. I think they were much more focused on their commercial area and not so much including residential. So I think that was a little bit of a difference too. So we're always trying to encourage people to look broadly and holistically, but sometimes their resources too is what we're hearing in terms of what they can pay for somebody to prepare for them is a limiting factor. So
Yeah, Enfield was definitely focused on downtown and commercial buildings. The Warrenton project was always broader in that it did have a lot of residential with it. And I think also really recently, within the last year or two, we've seen a lot of change from the Park Service and about what they are willing to let us do with boundaries. Which I think is a really good thing. I assume we will start to see more districts like this where we have some non-contributing resources or some vacant lots that are being included in order to create
embrace.
More
all encompassing.
More all encompassing, story.
So depending on the success of this as it moves up the chain, it could be an important tool that we could add to our toolkit.
Yes.
We talk about education,
Yes.
because we were saying that education, needs to be provided so that folk will get on the bandwagon and not remain off the bandwagon with regard to development of these historic districts. Okay.
I think that's well said. It's certainly like we always talk about here, when we bring something to you, what's similar to it before. So this will be, I think, a good mark in that direction.
And I would just add in general, thinking about, African American resources, that it's not just that civil rights kind of history. And if you, in talking, because a lot of this is oral history, that families have been in place for quite a long time. They've had this through line of stories. I mean, I keep every time I go to Warrenton, I get another story. And it just reminds me that the history goes back deeper than we kind of, because it's present, the civil rights, and we have a lot of emphasis, we kind of focus on that part of the African-American story, or we jump over and we're in enslavement. But there's that whole middle part that if you can elicit more of that information, it will make it a richer nomination.
Yeah, and Warrenton's got some, within that original district, has some Reconstruction era African-American related buildings, at least two houses I can think of right off the top of my head, but I think there were a couple more. And then the history of their fire department is really, Warrenton's a great, it's a great place. So.
Talk to the quilter from Battalion.
So that would, if I can add to highlight what Dr. Johnson is saying, I mean, that would be something important to think about in the education process, because we have that chronology with regard to history. We talk about slavery, and then we jump way to civil rights movement, as if those folk just disappeared, during the other years. And we want to say that, well, I was here, all during this period, So don't just bring me in when Rosa Parks, takes a seat on the desegregation of schools and all of that. But what about the progressive era, the 1900s and all of that? So, yeah, that's what.
And Madam Chair and Dr. Nar, if you don't mind me saying, I just want to credit Sarah for, she was the lead for our office to revisit this whole question. And I think this is a great example of what we're hoping to accomplish and have been accomplishing with our survey specialists, like Rebecca, and y'all have met Audrey Thomas out in the West, where we're going in to places that maybe didn't have the resources up front to hire somebody to do this. And so we're been working with Valdez, for example. And so we're going to look for continuing other projects. So just wanted to highlight too, it's a cooperative effort with our office and the local government. So
we all talked about the positive things that come from reducing the boundary. The curiosity to me, you said there were 3 contributing forces that y'all removed because they were not contiguous with the boundaries. I was just interested what they were.
There was one house, I think it was oh goodness, Gothic Revival house. It was pretty altered. So that's one of the resources that was removed. Let me just see if, yeah, so it was right around here. And there's, all these vacant lots now that are just visually separate. And then I think there was another altered building, that nothing that was so significant and highly intact that it made sense to jump over.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was interested in.
Yeah, unfortunate, but we just couldn't make that jump anymore because of loss of historic buildings in between.
Right, that concludes the presentation for the central and southeastern regions. Do I have a motion?
David Bergstrom, and then to approve that.
Is there a second?
Valerie Ann Johnson, I second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. All right, my watch tells me I need to stand up. So all of y'all, I'm going to take a stand-up break, and then we're going to go ahead and start the first of our study.
And then we won't do the whole thing.
Study list.
But you left with the
that's such a lot.
No, it's not.
There you go.
If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself,
Yeah, sure.
again, sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, I'm Lillian Candela. Just introducing myself again. I'm an architect and an architectural historian. I'm from Kramer Design Group. We're based in Detroit, Michigan. And we were lucky enough to do the architectural survey of the Broadell neighborhood in Fayetteville that I'm here to present. Are we good? Okay. Okay, so I wanted to provide some project background before we get into the survey itself, and how this project came to be. So the survey was funded by the city of Fayetteville, which received a matching grant from the Historic Preservation Fund from the National Park Service. The grant was administered through the State Historic Preservation Office. The city of Fayetteville was eligible for the grant to serve as certified local government. And this grant application was written with assistance from the Seabrook Broadell Community Watch, which is a neighborhood-run organization who's really fought for the preservation and recognition of this community, this neighborhood, a historically African-American neighborhood. Kramer Design Group, including myself and my colleagues, Sandra and Katie, we were retained to conduct the survey, and we conducted the fieldwork between June and August of 2023. Given that the survey was partially funded through a federal grant and was very community driven, I just want to note that the survey product has been really a collaborative effort between ourselves at KDG, the city of Fayetteville, the SHPO here, the Seabrook Broadell Community Watch, and of course, Dr. Brothers, who's here today. So locating the Broadell neighborhood, the bounds of the survey area follow historic maps of subdivisions provided by the city of Fayetteville staff to us and encompass the majority of the Broadell neighborhood. The neighborhood's located about 2 miles northwest of downtown Fayetteville along the Murchison Road corridor and adjacent to the campus of Fayetteville State University. And you can see it in this sort of orange outline here. The location of the Broadell neighborhood next to Fayetteville State University follows historical trends of African-American neighborhoods developing near and around schools for Black residents. The map on the screen was produced in 1963, and the orange areas indicate neighborhoods where non-white residents occupy between 10 and 49% of the housing stock. These areas tend to be located where Black schools were or are located. One example is the Orange Street School located on the 500 block of Orange Street in Fayetteville. The school was constructed around 1915 as an elementary school for African-American Fayetteville students. Demographic analysis indicates that there was a concentration of Black residents living near the Orange Street School during its tenure as an elementary school and later as a high school. And you can see the Orange School on the bottom left of the screen. The current Fayetteville State University was originally founded as the Howard School in 1867 and was located on Gillespie Street, just south of downtown Fayetteville. Similar story here, Black residents tended to be concentrated in this area. And in 1877, the Howard School became a teacher training institution known as the State Colored Normal School. And in 1939, the Fayetteville State Teachers College. By the early 1900s, the school had relocated to the present location of FSU along Murchison Road. And in 1969, the school formally became known as Fayetteville State University. Fayetteville State University is a historically Black college, and several Black neighborhoods developed and flourished around the university in the early 20th century, including Broadville. The continued growth of FSU prompted the development of these African-American neighborhoods surrounding the university and along both sides of that Murchison Road corridor. Murchison Road developed into a commercial corridor where Black-owned businesses served the surrounding Black neighborhoods and provided jobs to Black residents. Neighborhoods for Black residents platted in the 1950s were adjacent to established earlier Black neighborhoods branching off of these residential areas, including neighborhoods such as College Heights, which was platted in 1922, and a small residential area to the east of FSU's campus. This development pattern is typical of the expansion of African-American neighborhoods in southern cities in the mid-20th century. The first Black residential area to be platted adjacent to FSU, as I mentioned, is College Heights. And then later developments of Seabrook Hills and Brodell, both developed in the mid-20th century, can be considered extensions of that settlement in the College Heights area. Another primary driver for the development of the Brodell neighborhood was the continued growth of Fort Liberty, formerly known as Fort Bragg, and located just northwest of downtown Fayetteville. Fort Liberty was established as Camp Bragg in 1918 towards the end of World War I. And after the conclusion of World War I, the development of the fort turned the area into a training and weapons testing center. And during World War II and the Korean War, thousands of troops were located at the base, tremendously affecting the growth of Fayetteville in terms of housing, community development, and population. There was an acute shortage of housing for troops at the base during and post-World War II. Particularly for African-American troops. Often Black military men arrived at Fort Liberty with no available quarters and were thus obligated to live in tents or to construct their own separate barracks. To lessen this housing shortage, public housing projects were constructed in Fayetteville and subdivision development increased dramatically, peaking between 1940 and 49. At this time, Black service members stationed or employed at Fort Liberty made their homes in existing Black neighborhoods or newly constructed housing complexes and newly developed neighborhoods, including Brodell. The Brodell neighborhood is the earliest of the mid-20th century neighborhoods to be platted along Murchison Road near FSU and College Heights. The first subdivision in Brodell was platted in 1952 and was named Holly Springs Part 1, but some of the houses predate the subdivision and were constructed circa 1950. The land that would become this Brodell neighborhood has been held by the Broadfoot family since the mid-19th century. Members of the Broadfoot family have resided in Fayetteville since the early 19th century, and the Broadfoot family property was known as Holly Springs Farm, which in the first half of the 20th century was a dairy farm, hence the plat names Holly Springs. The Brodell neighborhood was established in several phases. The initial phase began in 1952 with the platting of the first Holly Springs subdivision. Brodell Homes work continued through 1965 when the final Holly Springs subdivision, Holly Springs Part 10, was platted. Brodell Homes platted a total of 10 subdivisions in the neighborhood between 52 and 65, and houses within the subdivisions dated from 1950 to around 1970. Residents interviewed in 2023 remembered when areas of the neighborhood were not yet platted and did not contain streets or houses. And here you can just see the growth of the neighborhood in that decade between 1959 and 1969.
Broadell Homes Incorporated was the local company responsible for the neighborhood's development. They were incorporated in February of 1952, and the company was owned by local white residents Charles Broadfoot Jr., and Charles Cogdell. The name Broadell is an amalgamation of the Broadfoot and Cogdell surnames. Broadell Homes was one of a handful of local development companies that advertised specifically to the African-American community. Another local company involved in Black home ownership was G. Blackwell Real Estate, also advertised in the 1960s city directory. You can see snippets from that on the screen. Blackwell Real Estate differed from Broadell Homes in that it was operated by Gloria Blackwell, an entrepreneurial Black woman who worked as a licensed real estate broker with an office on Hillsborough Street and at 1409 Murchison Road in the College Heights neighborhood. Gloria not only worked in real estate through her companies G. Blackwell Real Estate and Cross Creek Realty, but also helped establish one of Fayetteville's Black-owned banks and was deeply involved with the African-American business community in Fayetteville. The Broadell Homes office was located in the Broadell neighborhood itself, which we found very interesting, and is still standing at 772 Topeka Street. You can see it here. It was at this location that prospective property owners would go to select their lot, their house plan, and interior finishes. The property retains painted signage reading Broadell Homes and Cogdell and Broadfoot Rentals to this day, and is actually currently owned by the son of Charles Cogdell IV. The houses constructed by Broadell Homes Incorporated in the 50s and 60s tend to be brick or aluminum sheeted ranches. Some of them do have some contemporary style influence, including roof overhangs, recessed entrances, and carports. The majority of houses in the neighborhood were selected from a series of stock plans provided by Broadell Homes, but some were custom designed. Even the stock plans allowed for some level of customization though. In oral histories we conducted, residents recalled that some features of stock plan houses could be customized, such as the brick color, how to arrange the kitchen, and the size of the carport, or whether or not the house had a carport. Some custom houses were constructed alongside these stock plan houses. Most of them are located on Broadell Drive in Holly Springs Section 3 plat, with some others sprinkled throughout the neighborhood. These houses can be distinguished due to their large size compared to the neighboring houses. They tend to have atypical roof lines, prominent chimneys, and the use of architecturally distinct features. Some of them are pictured here. The neighborhood expanded between 1971 and 1977 and was developed by the Myers Development Company. This development is known colloquially to residents as New Broadell. Myers Development was incorporated in 1971, and like Broadell Homes, it was owned by white businessmen, brothers Joe and Bobby Myers and Lewis Wilson. Deed records indicate that Myers Development developed the Broadell subdivision by selling lots to local building companies who would then construct houses and resell the properties. Companies including Lorac Builders, Scotchcraft Realty, and Craftsman Builders constructed the houses in these subdivisions. Craftsman Builders constructed the vast majority of the houses, with the entire Broadell subdivision Section 2 being deeded to Craftsman Builders in 1973. While some of the houses in this section of Broadell are ranches, the vast majority of these are split level houses, often clad in a combination of brick and aluminum siding. Some examples here. So in terms of survey extents, it included both the Broadell Homes Inc. and the Myers Development developed plats and consisted of 533 total lots. The survey area was roughly bounded by Cross Creek and Topeka Street to the north, Cross Creek to the east, Cascade Street and Marion Court to the south, and Seabrook Road to the west. Properties were documented using a survey file for each plat of subdivision within the survey bounds. And just to point out that Myers Development Company extension is really this area here, and the remainder is Broadell Homes Incorporated development. I want to speak to community engagement because that was a really big part of our survey. In addition to fieldwork and archival research, our team learned a tremendous amount about the neighborhood through oral history interviews. The Seabrook Broadell Community Watch assisted us in setting up an oral history event in August of 2023, and our team was able to interview a large number of longtime residents in the neighborhood. It was through these interviews that we really understood the pride that Broadell residents have in their community. The neighborhood was decidedly middle class in an area that a lot of people strove to live in. Being adjacent to the Murchison Road corridor, the neighborhood was a space where Black people felt comfortable and had access to businesses, churches, schools, and community. Neighborhood residents were often educators at the local schools, professors or administrative professionals at FSU, business owners, or served in the military. One of our oral history interviewees recalled how her father and his friends, all members of the 82nd Airborne Division, all purchased houses near each other in Broadell. She just thought was really amazing. And here's some photos for that event. It was really a wonderful day. So with that, I'm going to present the Broadell Residential District for the study list. As a result of the survey, our team is recommending that the full extent of the survey area appears to be eligible as a historic district at the local level of significance. The proposed Broadell Residential District appears to be eligible under criterion C for architecture, criterion A for community planning and development, ethnic heritage, and education. The proposed period of significance is 1950 to 1978, beginning with the construction of the first houses in Holly Springs Part 1 and ending with the date of the last house constructed during the period of active development. Criteria consideration G does not need to be employed for the houses dating to the late 1970s because the majority of the houses in the proposed district are over 50 years old, and the proposed period of significance has a defined beginning and end based on the discrete period of time in which the subdivisions that comprise the neighborhood were under development. The proposed district contains mostly single-family houses, also includes 1 apartment building, 2 schools, and 1 church. We've determined that the proposed district includes 517 buildings that appear to contribute to the potential significance and 11 buildings that appear to be non-contributing. We really think this is a testament to the high level of integrity in this neighborhood. Additionally, only 5 lots in the neighborhood were left undeveloped. As described earlier, the single-family resources are a combination of ranches and split-level houses. Some houses are contemporary in style with the asymmetrical gabled roofs, overhanging eaves, exposed roof beams. These 3 over here, we think illustrate those contemporary influences that you see in the neighborhood. Overall, these houses have a high degree of integrity and there's, limited alterations that we saw. This is the 1 apartment building in the neighborhood. It's located at 1901 Seabrook Road. The building is in the modern style and is 2 stories with side gabled roof, features steel casement windows, appears to contain 8 units. It was developed contemporaneously with the rest of the neighborhood, which is why we included it in the district. This is the church in the neighborhood, College Heights Presbyterian Church, also on Seabrook Road. It was established in 1955 and became Fayetteville's first Presbyterian church with a predominantly African-American congregation. The church building was constructed in September of 1955, and a new sanctuary, the second building on the site, was constructed in 1964. The original building is modern in style, while the 1964 sanctuary on the left there does have some contemporary style elements to it, including that glazing on the primary facade. Many Broadell residents attended this church, and its location within the neighborhood definitely contributed and fostered to that sense of community. E.E. Smith High School on Seabrook Road is really at the center of the neighborhood. And many people in the oral histories considered it the centerpiece of the neighborhood, both literally due to its location and figuratively. The school body, originally physically located at the historic Orange Street School, moved to this location in 1954. The school was the primary high school for residents of the Broadell neighborhood and was the only public high school for Black children in the city of Fayetteville prior to the desegregation of public schools in the 1960s. Many of the educators and administrators at E.E. Smith lived in Broadell. Longtime Broadell resident Elaine Waters described in an oral history interview how your teachers were involved in your life and the parents were involved in the life of the school. The school figures prominently in residents' memories and lives as generations of the neighborhood attended or worked at this school. The south half of the building contains the original portion of the school, completed in 1955, and between 87 and 99, an addition was constructed on the north end of the buildings. It's clad in brick and has a flat roof with aluminum windows. Here's an aerial of E.E. Smith just to sort of show the scale of the school. The other school in the proposed district is Ferguson Easley Elementary School, also on Seabrook Road, sort of across from E.E. Smith. It was originally named number 12 Elementary School when it was constructed in 1959. It was the primary elementary school for Broadell residents, and it was originally constructed as an African-American elementary school. Neighborhood children either attended Ferguson Easley or the Newbold Training School, which was a teacher's training school associated with FSU, no longer extant. Similar to E.E. Smith, many of the educators at the school also lived in the Broadell neighborhood itself. The school is constructed in the modern style and consists of several large single-story buildings connected by breezeways. The roof is a combination of flat and sawtooth, and the northernmost building has this bonnet-like roof you can see on the right there, with wide eaves. The building appears to retain a high level of integrity. Ferguson Easley Elementary School was placed on the study list in 2009 at the conclusion of the Fayetteville Modern Architecture Survey, and also appears to contribute to the potential significance of the Broadell Historic District. Through archival research and windshield survey, we did do some comparative analysis of other African-American neighborhoods in Fayetteville of the same age and having similar development history. This includes Eccles Park, Seabrook Hills, and Savoy Heights. I know I spoke about College Heights a bit earlier in the presentation. While it does predate Broadell, and Broadell can sort of be an extension of College Heights, College Heights has a very different developmental history, and much of that neighborhood has been lost as FSU's campus has expanded. This comparative analysis highlights the importance of Broadell in the history of Fayetteville's African-American communities. Broadell is one of the earliest mid-20th century neighborhoods purpose developed for Black residents in Fayetteville. Other neighborhoods, such as Savoy Heights, Eccles Park, and Seabrook Hills, were not platted and houses not constructed until the earliest houses in Broadell were already completed. Broadell is also the largest mid-20th century African-American neighborhood in Fayetteville, geographically and in terms of number of houses. Further, with E.E. Smith High School nestled in the center of the neighborhood, Black children from these other neighborhoods often were educated in Broadell. Broadell can be considered a true centerpiece of Fayetteville's African-American community. So with that, that concludes my overview of the architectural survey of the Broadell neighborhood and my presentation of the proposed district for the study list. Again, I just want to thank the SHPO, the city of Fayetteville, and the residents of the Broadell neighborhood. They've been so helpful. This is KDG's first project in North Carolina, and it's been a really great experience. So happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Well, I have one just for a personal question. You mentioned the Howard School that was built in, opened in 1867. Is that building still on the campus at Fayetteville? Or is
It's at a separate location.
Is that, but it is still standing?
I believe it is, right? Is it?
I don't think it is.
Okay.
The E.E. Smith House still is there on, off of Gillespie Street.
Yes.
But the original structure is
So the
not.
building, school building is no longer standing.
Right, correct, yeah.
Any other questions?
So we do have a resident from this area.
Yes.
Broadell, Dr.
No,
Brothers.
no question, but certainly want to emphasize this. The passion project for me. And a family project for me. I am a product of that community. I attended both schools. Third generation of E.E. Smith, which is a predominantly and historically Black high school in North Carolina, which is currently being threatened to be relocated. We had this initial conversation of education to cultural communities, specifically around historically Black colleges and universities, because of the work that had been done in Charlotte around Johnson C. Smith. And it was a little slow moving. And I said, you know what? Don't worry about it. I'll take care of Fayetteville, Cumberland County. And I asked the staff to do an initial education session virtually during the pandemic. And they wholeheartedly participate. And I want to thank you all so much for lending your expertise because this topic was unfamiliar to the residents. A lot of original residents that are still there and we you see in the photo, they were cautious because it was unfamiliar and concerned about the financial responsibilities to take place as well, which is natural and anticipated. But I think in this work, we have to work with anticipation and communicating with authenticity and complete transparency. And the community, they were 110% on board. You see in the photos, the oral histories that were done. They met regularly within their community watch meetings and had this as a line item within their agendas. So that showed not just the commitment of the community, but the help specifically of the person in the center, Cynthia Leaks, who really helped me do the legwork in Fayetteville, because this was a 2-year process to the point where there was turnover within the development office in the city of Fayetteville. So we said, okay, we got to make sure this application gets in and we meet that due date. So she knocked on doors. Okay, where's the application? So she did a lot of the legwork. So I want to thank her. There are a lot of residents that are watching right now. Just saw an email that went through to a cultural group. So they're watching. Want to thank you so much. This was, I think, a great experience for them. They were cautious because you have to understand that the African-American experience is a sensitive experience, to the point when I did the unofficial study in 2010, I went to the cocktail house, asked for the blueprints. It was raining. Mind you, I'm still working full-time at Fayetteville State. On my lunch hour, it was raining. He had just thrown out the blueprints in the trash. So it shows you the limited perspective of what people think about African-American communities and the significance of the historical cultural awareness of living and building a community like that. And he asked me, do you want me to go get him? I said, yes, sir, I do. And I followed him outside to the trash. So we did oral history. So Mr. Broadfoot did participate in one of those initial oral histories. So there has been a lot of energy and synergy centered around this. So this will not be the only presentation that will come forward. So staff, get ready. And I look forward to getting on your calendar so we can develop those talking points for the community. And there's more to come. Thank you so much for the work you're doing, and we look forward to continuing this partnership and rapport with AEG. So thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
I was just gonna add that again, what's being highlighted and lifted up is the middle and upper middle class experiences of African Americans, which creates a counter narrative to what is always presented as like pathological. And so this, as you say, is gonna be one of the ones coming forward. We've got other areas. Greensboro is have been in conversations where y'all have really helped that out. And so these are critical moments. I mean, I heard about E.E. Smith into the state of North Carolina years ago. And so it does resonate as an important component of North Carolina's experience.
I just wanted to make a comment. I don't have the roots there that are as deep as brothers, but I have roots there. I lived in that community at one point. That was my entry into North Carolina. In the early 80s, I taught at Fayetteville State University. And I was looking to see if one of my houses didn't see one, but that community, I know quite a bit about that community. My oldest child. I walked her to Ferguson Easley School, so that's interesting. And all about what's so interesting about like the Howard School, 1867, that was the first site of Fayetteville State University. It was known as the Howard School, named for General O. Howard, the head of the so-called Freedmen's Bureau. But the Bureau of Freedmen, Refugees, and Abandoned Lands, that was the official name of it. And that was the same person that gave the name to Howard University, which still stands now. So, we'll hear more about this, but that was my entry in Fort Bragg. We talk about Fayetteville now because Fayetteville was interesting to me. I'd come from Augusta, Georgia, which has a military base there. The military base there is kind of obscure, but when you get to Bragg, it swallowed the Fayetteville State University. I mean, that's a military town, everything is centered on Fort Bragg now, which is Fort Liberty, and so you have to work in the shadow, of Bragg if you were there. So that's an interesting place, though. It's different from where I am now in Eastern North Carolina. I was told that you're going into another world. I said, I'm only going 100 miles kind of northeast of Fayetteville. But when I got over there culturally and all of that, the landscape, it's a different world on that side. And I think a lot of it has to do with Fort Bragg, the folk who came there, they came from all these other different places and they pushed back the provincial boundary of Fayetteville. So it doesn't really operate as just a small southern town, but it has a more cosmopolitan basis there. So that was attractive to me there. But when I got to Greenville, Eastern North Carolina, I'm in another world.
I understand another world. Do we have a motion on, yes, Mr.
Chair, I think it would be appropriate if Dr. Brothers made this.
Yeah.
Dr. Brothers,
Make the motion.
is there a second?
I'll say.
Right? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much for your presentation and thank you for coming down to North Carolina.
Thank you.
At this time, we're going to adjourn, let's just check. Okay. We're going to adjourn for lunch and you can continue your conversation. We will reconvene and do the rest of the study guide.
Just no conversation on agenda items. Just no conversation about agenda items.
No agenda items can be discussed. All right. Have a good meal.
Yes, right.
Did you want to put for lunch?
No.
you are going to get mileage on this form. And if you spent the night last night, you need to turn in your hotel room, or you can mail it back, but they need to know that it is coming. And the final thing is that we have parking passes. So if you parked across the street, you do not have to pay for parking. So before you leave, as you're going out the door, get your parking pass, because that'll save you at least $12. And the final thing has to do with your meal. I'm old enough that I have served on numerous committees for the Department of Archives. In fact, they kind of rotated me through all the different volunteer committees that they can have. The one thing I can tell you, the advantage of being on this committee is you get a great lunch. The other committees, not so good. So you know that you are getting the very best lunch when you get to have lunch here. So, and Valerie can say the same thing because she's been rotating with me for not as long as I have been rotating, but she has been rotating with me for a while. All right. Mrs. King, let's get started with this and go through the Western region.
Right. Our first property for the study, for the normal constituent driven study list application portion of our agenda is the Roadhus Mill, which is in Burke County, and here is Burke County shaded in blue. And then you can see by the star that Roadhus is right on the eastern edge of the county, and it's right on the line with Caldwell, and in fact is in both of those counties. At the turn of the 20th century, John Rhodes and George Hiss acquired approximately 200 acres in the Catawba River, which forms the boundary between Burke and Caldwell. And they constructed a water-powered cotton mill that was the first textile mill in Caldwell County. All of it was on the Caldwell side at that time. And in 1903, the mill town that developed around the cotton mill was incorporated as Roadhus. In 1912, construction began on a second mill on the south side of the river, which is what I have circled here, and that's the building that we're considering today. This mill was originally called the E.A. Smith Manufacturing Company after a third investor in Roadhus. Between the world wars, Southern Power, which is now Duke Energy, owned the mills simply because Southern Power wanted the water rights. You can see here on the old power plant and dam that was constructed for the two mills is still there. And that has been placed on, or that has been determined eligible through the Section 106 review process some time ago. Southern Power wanted the water rights, and so they acquired the two mills and they leased the mills to stockholders who produce cotton under the name Roadhus Cotton Mills. At the end of World War II, Pacific Mills purchased the mill buildings and they made the transition from cotton to synthetics. And then in 1954, Burlington Mills acquired Pacific Mills and folded the two synthetic mills under their umbrella until 1964. And so you can see from this bare spot of land where the original Caldwell County side of the river mill was located. It was demolished circa 2005, sometime between 2000 and 2005. And so the second mill, the 1912 building, is the one that survives. As I pointed out, there's the power plant in the dam. There's a lake that's formed on the west side, and then the river is still flowing. And there's a bridge between the two sides of Roadhus, and you have mill housing all up on the rolling topography here, and then here south of this mill building. So this whole area, this whole town is completely dominated by the mill and the mill housing and the things that are there to support that industry. In 1964, let's see here. Oh, I had a couple of photographs for you of those things. So the bridge going into Caldwell, and you can see some of the rhythm of the mill housing up on the hill. And then the trees weren't working with me, but there's the power plant and the mill in the background. So in 1964, the building that we're considering today transitioned to the Burlington Industrial Division.
And they began producing aerospace materials for the US government, NASA, Goodyear, Firestone, DuPont, Uniroyal, and more than 200 other companies. Textiles that were woven in Rhodus served as heat shields for the capsules and shuttles that were returning from space. And Burlington also produced bulletproof vests for soldiers in Vietnam and for US law enforcement, as well as parachutes, bomb blankets, and crowd control fencing. In 1964, Burlington had to reinforce the upper floors of the existing mill building because the special machinery that was required to manufacture all of that heavy duty textile material greatly exceeded the weight of your typical textile equipment. The industrial division operated from 1964 until 1983. And in 1983, Burlington sold the mill to a hosiery company. In 1995, NASA formally recognized the contributions that were made by the town of Rhodus to the nation's space program. And so here's an aerial close-up on the mill. The roof that's a little lighter in color is the original sections of the mill. It's at least a full 2 stories with a full basement. And then this slightly later addition from the Burlington Industries period, that is a 3rd story in excess of what's already above ground. And then there's a few other additions to that original footprint as well. There's a look at the exterior of the mill. You can tell the older section of the mill because we have the infilled arched windows, as we see on just about every mill building. When air conditioning was available, it was put in for the, the comfort and safety of the mill workers. And then this is quite an expansive mill. It goes on and on and on 3 levels in a basement. So these are just a few selected photographs of some of the interior features. But what you're seeing here is true of every floor and every section of this building. And then specifically showing you the basement here, again, the whole basement looks like what you're seeing here. I'm specifically showing you this because between 1964 and 1975, this was one of Burke County's nuclear fallout shelters. And so they had the capacity to shelter 2,300 people in the event of disaster. And so there were rows and rows of shelving and food and all kinds of essentials. And what I'm showing you here is a ladder down to a freshwater spring that's underneath this mill building. And so in addition to being right on the Catawba, there's a source of bubbling water underneath the building too. And I couldn't get light down there well enough to take a photograph that would mean anything. But as you're standing here by this ladder, you can hear the spring bubbling up. So that's an interesting feature of this textile mill that we don't see all the time. So staff recommendation is to place the Rhodus Mill, the Burlington Industrial Division, on the study list because of its potential eligibility under criterion A for industry. We note that the period of significance would likely correspond to the years that it operated as Burlington Industrial, which started in 1964. During these years, the mill was the backbone of the economy in the town of Rhodus. And the folks who worked in this mill played a major role in events in US history, such as the space race and the Vietnam War. And then as you saw, there's also an interesting Cold War history here with the fallout shelter in the basement. The mill building has high material integrity to that period of its history, the Burlington industrial period. And additionally, 1964 is when the earlier sister mill on the north side of the river ceased to operate concurrent with this mill building. And so the loss of integrity sustained by the loss of that other mill building does not pertain to the Burlington Industrial Division period of history. And that's what I have for Rhodus. Are there any questions before I move on?
I have.
Yes, sir.
You're gonna do another one?
I am, but I'd be happy to make a question about it.
And you may know something about this and someone else may know something about this. I know Catherine Bashir has done a lot of work on architectural history. Do we have an expert in North Carolina on architectural history of mills, of these mills. I mean, we presenting all of these different structures here. Section. We looked at the architectural history. So that's how.
I will say that there are a few consultants who've worked in the state a long time who have done many, many national register nominations for textile mills. And I would probably go to a consultant who's done a lot of national register tax credit work in that area as being the closest thing that we have to like a Catherine Fleischer of
Yeah.
Yeah, and
textile mills.
and those people also work in other states that are similar, South Carolina in particular. From what I understand of mill architecture, it's taken from like the Massachusetts model. I've heard that talked about, especially that kind of, you know, the segmental arch windows and that kind of thing. It was kind of a type is what I've always read and come to understand. So there's some variety depending on what the fabrication was, textile, furniture, so forth. But there seems to be this current that was coming out of New England that was sort of imported into the South when they started moving their operations down south. That's kind of my take on it. And then we got interesting when air conditioning came.
Yeah, base spacing was all standardized when it
That's right.
timber, then it changed a little bit.
That's right, sort of a template to it.
Yeah, C.A. Tompkins was a mill designer, and he and NC State and Clemson, they did a lot to foster sort of this, not really standardized, but kind of, you know, a standardized idea of slow burn construction, light and air, controlling light and air and controlling workers and preventing or minimizing fire. But we don't really have, I can't think of someone who is specifically like the middle person, but we do have a number of outstanding consultants who have done a lot of writing and research, and then of course there's a whole other avenue of labor history. So you know, it would be wonderful if we had a statewide context, if we had a statewide NPDF, if we just declared all of them eligible, so we could just.
We would not be here much longer to do.
But I will say this sort of what it showed up as was the standard template, whatever you want to say. But then I think things get very interesting. The expediency of how they were expanded, what happened when air conditioning came, and then I think there's more complexity that's very
It's all
unique.
kind of this.
It's sort of the same idea, but the point is the way it manifested at a particular mill, I think was quite variable, because to me, that's where we get into questions of integrity and what does this mean and how can it be reused if that's ultimately the interest, but you know, because it wasn't really designed to don't look out the window anymore. I think that was a labor aspect as well. So you can concentrate more, some thought about that. I do know that there's been some of the architectural journals we get, some of the really early mills, not the New England oriented mills, but like Graniteville in South Carolina. That was its own sort of organic thing that came about pre-Civil War. And what it was related to, maybe there was some New England connection, but I know there's been some scholarship done about that kind of early mill. I don't know so much on this though, on this era.
Well, what I was thinking about historically, UNC did a 5 or 6 year project with their graduate students. And the result was a book, not so much on the architecture, but on mills, on the people who had done mills, oral history of the people.
That's right.
And so all of that documentation is there.
Right.
That we might be able to pull someone who might be able to pull something together. I mean, the book they published was one where they gave credit to all the students. I just remember Lorraine Jones.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the families, the big scholarly work on it.
Yeah, Like a Family is the title, yeah. But it's all, maybe they want to do it on the architecture.
Well, it all, I think what I always reflect on is we can't understand these buildings without understanding the people, and they just feed into one another.
See, I read every now and then.
But yeah, if you haven't read Like a Family, that's a great,
Yeah, it
that's
is.
a great book.
Okay. All right, and then the second property that I have for you today is Willow Valley Cemetery, which is in Iredell County, shown in blue. And then the star shows you that Morrisville is southern end of Iredell County. Willow Valley Cemetery is owned by the town of Youngsville. The earliest grave dates to 1855, and the cemetery is the site of active burials today. The study list application states that, quote, "The city cemetery evolved by happenstance as the town acquired a hodgepodge of parcels over time," end quote. The first 2 acres were purchased from the widow of John Franklin Moore, for whom Mooresville is named, in 1884. According to the town of Mooresville's website, the cemetery consists of over 29 acres, though the study list application proposes only 9 1/3 acres for consideration today. The proposed boundaries include circulation paths, monuments, entrance gates and piers, landscaping, and all marked graves, which include bevel, ledger, and tablet markers, as well as obelisks, sculptural monuments, and tombstones. Plots are mapped in units that measure 20 feet by 20 feet, and there's a vehicular circulation network consisting of 1 lane interconnecting drives. The land has a rolling topography that slopes downward to the south and west, and there are a number of mature deciduous trees as well as ornamentals. So here we have some overview photographs that were sent in as part of the study list application of the cemetery. Some closer views of some of the more vertical markers and sculptural elements. And then lastly, some more general views of, and you can see a lot of the topography here in some of these, as well as the orderly laid out nature of the plot. Cemeteries fall into a category of properties that National Register Bulletin tells us are not usually considered for listing. And so we have some information here from Bulletin 15. In order to be eligible, cemeteries must meet criteria consideration in addition to the regular requirements for significance and integrity that we talk about for all properties. The study list application for Willow Valley Cemetery states that it is significant under criterion A in the areas of landscape architecture and social history, and that it qualifies under criteria consideration D as it derives significance from distinctive design features and association with historic events. And you see here from the bulletin that there are 4 ways to consider criterion consideration D for cemeteries. And these last 2, the distinctive design features and historic events, are the 2 that the application has highlighted for Willow Valley. You'll also see the text here from in our bulletin 15 that says cemeteries must embody values that are beyond personal or family specific emotions. Okay. The application has not proposed a period of significance for the cemetery, and that's very common. Most applications we receive do not. However, to think about distinctive design features, we need to think a little bit about what era that would apply to. So the first 2 acres, as I said, were acquired in 1884. The cemetery is still active today. Burials are ongoing. The study list application gives us a thorough history of Willow Valley's development. The author relied on town council meeting minutes, on deed books in Iredell County, and on historic newspaper articles to identify growth and change in the cemetery over time. According to the application, quote, "The cemetery grew intermittently over time, generally spurred by the need for more burial space and by opportunities to acquire adjacent parcels," end quote. The general sense from the application is that the town of Mooresville met the needs of its citizens as the needs arose, but the town does not appear to have been maintaining or expanding the cemetery according to a set standard or with any particular design principles in mind.
Between 1918 and 1921, the Civic League, which was a women's organization in Mooresville, fundraised so that the group could improve and beautify the cemetery. The Civic League sponsored a contest that named the cemetery, gave it its name Willow Valley, and installed this iron archway once the name was chosen. And they also embarked on an ambitious campaign to plant shrubs and trees throughout the cemetery. Unfortunately, the plantings from this era have not been maintained over time, and they were not replaced in kind as the plant material died. So the landscape improvements that are captured in the town meeting minutes are not physically present. Some of them are, and a lot of materials lost. Continuing on to further development history, in 1941, the United Daughters of the Confederacy installed a monument to the Confederate dead. And as late as 2016, the town has added a plaza and 3 flagpoles to the cemetery. So to look at what the NR Bulletin tells us about distinctive design features, it gives us an example of an eligible cemetery and a cemetery that's not eligible using distinctive design features. The eligible cemetery is a Victorian cemetery is eligible. It really expresses the aesthetic principles related to funerary design for that period through such features: overall plan, landscaping, statuary, sculpture, fencing, buildings, and grave markers. The not eligible example says that a cemetery is not eligible for design features or design values if it no longer conveys the historic appearance because of the introduction of new grave markers. In the eligible example, they were able to identify a period of time to which the distinctive design features apply. Perhaps the most notable time period in the development of the cemetery would be that 1918 to 1921 era of improvement by the women's organization. But we do have the issue that a lot of that does not survive today. And of course, things have continued to be added to the cemetery. So there's new grave markers, but also new Confederate monument, new plaza with flagpoles, et cetera. The cemetery also talks about the association with Willow Valley and historic events. So the example that they've given us here for historic events says, if a cemetery is associated with an important Civil War battle, then it can also be eligible. But if the cemetery is associated with a battle that is not important, the battle itself has to be important in order for the association between the cemetery and the event to be important. So again, the application argues that association with historic events pertains to the activities of the Civic League, the women's organization, in the late 19-teens and early 20s. So to consider the cemetery that way, we would need to establish that the Civic League itself was important. If we were able to establish significance, that again brings us back to an integrity issue of not having the material surviving from that era of improvement. So for that reason, while we find that Willow Valley Cemetery appears to be a very attractive asset to the town of Mooresville, we do not recommend placement of Willow Valley Cemetery on the study list because we were not able to identify an area of significance for the cemetery that would also satisfy the criteria and consideration D requirements.
You said they only wanted to do like 9 acres, the 20-some acre total. So there'd be a boundary issue too.
And the application did not specify why it was that 9 acres. And I didn't look at the town's website until I believe it was yesterday or the day before. So I didn't catch that there was a size discrepancy until right before the meeting. That's something I would have asked for more.
So the other question I had too, and you may not know this detail either, was the ownership.
The town.
The town owns it, so those plats were not sold to the families?
I think that the town, I have not looked at
They
I've not traced any land myself, but
I believe that the town has been able to acquire those parcels outright over the years and has been able to add to the cemetery.
Well, that just struck me as another potential issue. You may have multiple owners of plats that it was platted and people bought them outright.
It could be. I
So
believe that the way the study application, let's say this application is presenting it is that the town owns the cemetery, but I did not look into specific ownership of different sections of the cemetery. So that could be an issue.
I mean, otherwise, I think some more complexity on top of an exception issue that I don't think it meets it necessarily.
Often those cemeteries had a 99-year lease or something of the sort, so it could really be a complication here, yeah.
Valerie and Johnson, I move that we accept staff recommendation not to put this on the study, put Willow Valley Cemetery on the study list.
On the mail.
Oh, and to accept staff recommendation to put Rhodes
On the
Mill on the study list. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Dr. Brothers, I second.
Okay. All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. We will now go to the central and southern region. I will apologize, but I had one phone call that I had to take, and that was it. So.
Thank you, Beth.
This application came to us as a district expansion to the Foster and West Gear Streets Historic District in Durham. But staff suggested, and the applicant agreed that the expansion should be to a different district. So I'm presenting instead an expansion to the North Durham Duke Park Historic District. So let's get located first. We are in Durham. The pin is the location in question, and we're just directly north of downtown Durham. As I said, this is a district expansion proposal, but the goal is just adding basically two resources, a school that I've circled and the park behind it, which is also circled now. And the park served as the school grounds. As you can see, the school and park are nearly surrounded by existing districts. The application proposed expanding the Foster and West Gear Streets district because that allowed for the school and park to be listed while excluding apartment buildings immediately north of the school. However, after internal discussions, staff felt like a more logical proposal was adding the school and park to the North Durham Duke Park District because that area includes the houses where most of the school's students would have lived historically. This 1937 Sanborn map gives you an idea of where the school is in relationship to how the residential area of North Durham Duke Park developed. Obviously, that's the large area to the top right versus the more industrial Foster and Gear Streets to the south. This would mean adding apartment buildings along Trinity Avenue that might be non-contributing resources, but they are in keeping with the older apartment buildings immediately to the west, which are already study listed in an existing expansion area for this same neighborhood along Trinity. So these are the apartment buildings that are already included in a North Durham Duke Park study list expansion area. And then also the building on the far right, you can see part of it, that's already in the study list expansion area. And then as you look to the left, you're sort of looking farther down the street. Those buildings are a little bit newer, but they are not, they're not jarring. They're sort of this kind of the same vibe, the same feeling. And feeling, of course, being one of the 7 aspects of integrity. So the proposal before you is for a little bit different expansion area. So back to the primary resource proposed for inclusion in the North Durham Duke Park District. This is the North Durham Grammar School constructed in 1929. An earlier circa 1901 school had stood to the left, it's over to the left side, kind of where the words are. And that was torn down long ago, not sure exactly when. The school today, as you see, it was designed by George Watts Carr of Durham in association with Northrop and O'Brien from Winston-Salem. The school has a modest addition to its rear corner. You can see that off to the left side or the southwest corner. And here we see the front or east elevation that faces into the North Durham Duke Park Historic District. So we'll just move around the building. This is the back or the side. And then the back. The North Durham Park is a sunken open space behind the school with early 20th century stone walls, common to many public and institutional landscapes in Durham. And moving around the building. Back to the front. Staff recommends study listing the North Durham Grammar School by expanding the boundary of the North Durham Duke Park Historic District. Does anyone have questions on this one? We can always come back to it, but I've got two more, so.
Anybody want to guess where these pictures were taken?
Okay, moving on to another cemetery. The Geer Cemetery is located in Durham County. We're right back. We've moved over just a little bit from where we were. And this little segment of railroad track here will help orient you on this plat map. This is the plat map of the Geer property. And this is the tract of land where we're going to talk about that by the time this map was made had been used as a cemetery for decades. In 1872, Durham had opened Mapleview Cemetery for its white citizens, but that cemetery prohibited black burials. In 1876, when an 11-year-old African-American farmhand on the Geer plantation was accidentally dragged to death by a horse, this is where he was buried. And the following year, in 1877, Frederick and Polly Geer sold this tract of land to three men, John O'Daniel, Nelson Mitchell, and Willis or Willie Moore, who were acting as cemetery trustees. This is an article published in the Durham Sun in 1897, and it describes a full cemetery with many wooden markers and only a few stone markers. Today, the cemetery is bounded by houses on three sides and a parking lot on its eastern side. Burials include Durham's most prominent Black citizens representing business people, educators, and ministers. Many of the burials are of formerly enslaved people, war veterans, and victims of the 1819 flu pandemic. Many of the families associated with the Geer Cemetery had strong ties to the Haytime neighborhood, which the Durham Freeway mostly obliterated. The cemetery may contain as many as 1,500 burials, with oral traditions suggesting burials on top of one another. Stone and concrete markers are scattered throughout the cemetery, but the vast majority of burials are unmarked and no wooden markers remain. In 1927, the city of Durham opened Beechwood Cemetery for African-American burials, and the last burials in Geer Cemetery seem to date from the mid-1940s. Because the Geer Cemetery received a grant from the Emergency Supplemental Historic Preservation Fund, which you hear us say hurricane grants all the time, we already have the National Park Service's conclusion on this cemetery, which states that the cemetery is eligible under Criterion A for its association with the broad patterns of our history as a tangible resource representing a Reconstruction era Black community that was, in essence, decimated by road construction and urban renewal in the latter part of the 20th century. So staff recommends study listing the Geer Cemetery. Any questions? We'll keep on trucking. Okay. The barns, garage, and shops This is in Johnston County, so we've moved a little bit south and east of where we are right now. And the garage is located up here in the corner of Johnston, sort of the top corner of Johnston County. And it's the long building running parallel to the road, and it also includes this square rooftop you see down just off the southern end of the long skinny building. And then this is a look at the front of it. Walter Barnes joined the U.S. Army, where he became a mechanic and served in World War II. After the war, Mr. Barnes built an automobile garage on the side of the road where the pond is now. That burned in 1960, and he constructed this building to replace his first garage. Over time, he expanded the building to include a barber and beauty shops and a grocery store, and he built the pavilion over to the right-hand side to shelter a cucumber market. Mr. Barnes opened his building to the community for use by local Black County agricultural extension agents and home economics teachers for meetings, classes, and demonstrations. And he rented chairs in the barber shop free of charge to young men who were getting started in barbering. He was also a devotee of baseball, and he tried out for the Brooklyn Dodgers. He didn't make the team, but he hosted baseball games on the land behind the shop and allowed neighborhood families to act as consultants to make a little extra money. In short, he created a social and commercial hub that supported career development and economic development and social activities for the local population. Mr. Barnes stopped working as a mechanic around 2000, and his son had operated a car repair business here until 1998. Mr. Barnes died in 2010. The barbershop, beauty shop, and store were in the brick section. The shops stopped operations in the 1980s. The baseball field was originally to the left of this image or to the north of the garage, and its last iteration was situated behind the garage, and no obvious evidence of the baseball field remains today. The pavilion sheltered the cucumber market. Here, Mr. Barnes operated essentially a buying station. Farmers would bring cucumbers here to be graded and weighed, and Mr. Barnes would then buy the cucumbers and transport them to Mount Olive, where he sold them to the pickle company. Cucumbers were graded as 1s, 2s, or 3s. 1s were smaller and more valuable. And the operation provided local farmers with income and also local Black men with jobs, as well as some women. He did employ some women in this effort. This is the south end of the garage. And then the north end. This is a very neatly drawn measured drawing. So here we are inside the garage section. Another look inside the garage. This is kind of right in the middle in the garage storeroom. This is inside the barber shop area. The grocery, beauty parlor, and then to the cucumber market or cucumber pavilion. And then this is a photograph of a photograph on a computer screen. It's a little stretched out, and it makes the building look a lot longer than it is, but that is the same building and pavilion when it was in operation. The Barnes Garage and Shops served as a small but important community and commercial center for the Black community in the northern corner of Johnston County. A lack of maintenance has eroded the building's historical integrity, but it currently retains enough integrity to convey its significance as a center of Black commerce. And staff believes the Garage and Shops could be a candidate for the National Register for its association with Black history and commerce. However, the building and site do require maintenance and stabilization, and that does need to happen in the very near future in order for it to retain that integrity. You can see some holes in the roofs there. So that concludes my presentations. Any questions about any of those three?
Is there any chance of getting some patches on the roof?
I don't know any chances of getting the roof patched. I think that the applicant is really interested in her father's history. And this is a part of recording that and recognizing that. I don't know that they have any immediate plans for the building. But that is, something we will be communicating back to them, that it needs to have some maintenance and some mothballing at least.
Thank you.
I don't know if I missed it, but staff is recommending all three of those.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. We need a motion.
So we didn't vote.
We'll do it at the.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. Oh, we're doing the whole region. I got it.
I'll read you.
Gotcha.
There's one that we need to pull out and discuss.
And I do want to note on the agenda that I'm down for 3 study lists, but the last one, we are striking because, it's been concluded that we need a little more historic clarification and more investigation. So, you might see it at the June meeting, just depends.
Which one is that, Stanley or?
Right, the Stanley County Training School, the 3rd one.
That's been deferred by the applicant?
By the applicant, after talking with the applicant, there's still some questions about historic photos and is this building what we're looking at? So, upon further investigation, we'll see if it moves forward. The first stop is the Johnston Building, located in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. Mecklenburg is the far western Piedmont. The city of Charlotte takes up the majority of the county, and uptown Charlotte is at its core. The Johnston Building is located at 212 South Tryon Street in Charlotte's main, which is Charlotte's main north-south corridor, bisecting the uptown. Charlotte's a new South city that exploded with growth, mostly in the financial sector in the later quarter of the 20th into the 21st century. And due to that rapid growth, many historic buildings have been greatly altered or are no longer extant in the name of progress. Seen here on the HPO web map at the right, the properties with a black dot indicate the historic resources that is gone. And there are a dozen or so of those properties within just a couple of blocks of the Johnston Building. The building is roughly located on 0.27 acre rectangular parcel fronting South Tryon. The building largely constitutes the size of the parcel, and it was originally constructed as 15 stories in 1924. 2 additional stories were added in 1929, and the 17-story steel frame building is clad in limestone at the south facade, and the secondary elevations are clad in brick. All elevations feature replacement 1/1 double hung metal windows at the upper floors, which appear to date to the 1981 through 83 renovation. When the Johnston Building opened to tenants in 1924, it was the tallest building in Charlotte, and it was named for the Charles Worth Johnston, who was a major investor in the project. The original 15-story office building was designed by acclaimed New York architect W.L. Stoddard, with a grand front entrance and first floor lobby design. Both still exist today and boast of 450 individual offices and tenants, including Bell South, various cotton brokers, and realty companies when it first opened. It's highly sought after. In the 70s was a time of great economic change and urban redevelopment in downtown Charlotte. Eventually, it grew to the largest banking capital in the country behind New York City. Even the Johnston Building was considered for redevelopment in 81. Fortunately, the building was preserved and only renovated. I know there's a lot of words here, so I'm just going to briefly go over it. In 1980, a letter was sent to the keeper at the National Park Service from our state office with a completed Part 1 application for historic tax credits, stating that it meets criteria for inclusion in the National Register. Plans were underway to complete a nomination, though it never came to fruition. In August of 1991, it was determined to have a statewide level of significance.
And in 1992, the Johnston Building was designated a local landmark for its exterior and certain interior features, including the first floor, marble staircase, and elevator lobbies, which you'll see as I tour around the building here. So the south facing facade is the most ornamental of all elevations, with a granite water table extending along the base. The first 2 stories of the building are defined by the 3 arched bays containing storefront windows and a primary entrance at the center. The window glazing is non-historic and likely replaced during the 81 through 83 renovation. The 3rd story replacement 1/1 windows are beneath a string course that separates the base from the shaft of the exterior. Between stories 4 through 11, there is minimal ornamentation. The 12th through 14th stories are set above another string course, distinguishing the shaft from the capital of the building. The 16th and 17th stories, constructed in 1929, are relatively void of ornamentation. We'll now move around the building, and this is starting from the west elevation. So it's clad in a buff brick. The first story features stylistic Palladian windows set within a larger rectangular opening along the north end of the elevation, while the south end is void of openings. Floors 2 through 15 feature the double hung 1/1 replacement metal windows. And the 16th and 17th stories have individual double hung windows. Along the south end of tripartite windows, along with the remainder of the elevation. So you probably can't see it very much in the left photo, but the windows are a little bit different on those top floors. This is the north elevation, or the rear that butts an alley. And this is the east elevation, which is almost identical to the west elevation. And the Johnston building is still freestanding, and it's located across this very narrow alleyway to the 1967 NCMB building. That's really hard to take a picture. I applaud the applicant. There are 4 elevator cabs. Oh, sorry. Interior of the first floor lobby corridor. You can see all the elements here. There were originally places for tenants, storefronts, things of that nature. Here we have the 4 elevator cabs, and 2 utilitarian stairwells were accessed on the upper floors. There's a picture of that later. The lobby also features a historic marble staircase extending between the basement and the 2nd story. The upper floors have functioned as leasable tenant space since the building's initial construction. As such, the upper floor levels have routinely been updated to meet the needs of the various tenants. Finishes, however, generally date to the 1980s renovation of the building. Although the finishes were changed, the primary public circulation of the building has remained central to each floor plan. And the upper floors feature a variety of layouts beyond the elevator lobby. Certain floors have a more open floor plan, like this one shown here, with a few walls. While other features in the individual tenant spaces with varying floor plans and finishes, lots of drop ceilings and interior spaces that have been broken up. So this is the 17th floor corridor. There are many examples of pre-1930s skyscrapers in North Carolina. However, most in Charlotte have been demolished in the late 80s. And the First National Bank building at 110 through 112 South Tryon Street, seen here, with a photo from 1930 on the left and a street view from Google on March 2020. It is a similar building, skyscraper of the time, yet it is not completely freestanding like the Johnston building. The proposed boundary is the parcel line indicated in red. In summary, staff recommends the Johnston building for placement on the state study list at the local level for both criterion A in the area of commerce and C for architecture. It retains a moderate to high degree of integrity. So, any questions, or I can move on? Right. My second study list presentation today is the Roseboro Downtown Historic District located in Sampson County. So Roseboro is about 30 minutes southeast of Fayetteville and about 15 minutes to Clinton, the county seat. The town of Roseboro is approximately 1.2 square miles with a population of roughly 1,200. It does not have a historic preservation commission, but the town did receive $825,000 grant as part of the Rural Transformation Grant Fund from the North Carolina Department of Commerce. And as part of this grant fund, money was allocated for preparing a National Register nomination for the town. Sampson County, including Roseboro, was surveyed in 1979 by Tom Butchko. A number of buildings were noted, mostly from the 1910s through the 20s. Though Roseboro does not lie on a true north-south axis for the purpose of this presentation, cardinal directions will be used for ease of understanding. And here's a couple of street views from the 79 survey. There were a lot of great photos in the survey and drawings and notes, so that'll be important for a later nomination. The industry of the publication and inventory of historic architecture, Sampson County, stemmed from the Butchko 1979 survey. In it, he writes that the Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley Railroad constructed a line along southwest Sampson County from approximately 1888 to 1890. It resulted in the establishment of numerous towns, including Roseboro. The downtown was a retail and financial center for the employees of the mills and light manufacturing in Roseboro. Many of the first commercial structures were framed along the railroad that ran north-south through town, but due to recurrence of fires, notably one in 1921, stores moved to the present location on Roseboro Street, the main east-west corridor. Most of the brick commercial buildings along Roseboro Street from the 1922 Sanborn are extant, circled in red on the map at the right. Though the tracks were later removed, indicated by the blue line, the former railroad depot is just east of the railroad, noted here with a green circle. The majority of the surviving structures were built around 1922, with a few exceptions. 1910 Kohari Bank Building at the corner of Railroad and Roseboro Streets, and West and Tart Pharmacy and General Store, built in 1919, just a few parcels west. And here is the aerial of the core commercial one-block section of West Roseboro. And we'll now start looking at the street going along the south side and then back along the north side of this core. So to orient you, the former rail depot can be seen in the background on the very far left. And all photos were taken in September of 2023 for a site visit. Continuing along Roseboro Street to the west. Here, we're looking back to the east, still looking at the south side. Notice the checkered pattern on the facade and decorative headers. And this is the southeast corner at West Street. So there are a lot of directions in those towns. Directional streets. So now this is turning around, looking at the north side of Roseboro Street, starting at West Street and moving towards Railroad. Some smaller commercial buildings on this side. And the center buildings were the Taken West drugstore noted earlier. We end up back at the Kohari Bank building on the northwest corner. And this is a view looking back along the north side of Roseboro Street. So now that we've looked at the core, we're going to kind of look at the fringe is on east and west side. So now we're looking north on Railroad Street towards Roseboro Street. Note the former depot on the right. It was moved back from the rail line, so it's still facing the same direction, but it was moved. So that's just something that people in the town let us know. And actually, you can see it on the Sanborn maps that it's not quite lined up the way it used to be. Still looking north on Railroad Street at Roseboro Cross intersection. This is the Google Street View from February of 2023. You can see that the city park where there's a city park where the rail line with one-way streets east and west on the side of the former rail line. Another notable building is 108 Northeast Railroad Street. This small two-room building was built circa 1897. The building has had many such uses such as a doctor's office, post office, barber shop, and finance office. And here's a view on Roseboro past the city park, which is across from the former depot. And here we have a view looking east on Roseboro with the former depot to the right. So I've just kind of like turned around to the right. There's the depot on the right. So now we're going to look at the west portion, west of the core of the commercial district. This is the street view looking back on Roseboro Street. Of local significance is a building at 212 West Roseboro Street. It was the location of the first hospital and now home to the Beatitude House, an organization with a partnership of local churches. This is the building between the Beatitude House and the beginning of the core commercial block. And here's a view turning north around that building toward the west on West Street. There are some interesting buildings in this section thought to have maybe been African-American part of town. And this is looking back towards Roseboro Street, that same building on the left there. So this is the proposed boundary in red by the applicant. And after a site visit and some discussion with our staff and other staff, the boundary would likely be much smaller. Something like that portion of the east of the railroad street, excluding that. Of course, though, would ultimately be decided during the review process. So you're not necessarily saying yes to this green area as being the only defined study list area, but it is nice to just give consultants kind of an idea of what we're looking at. So in conclusion, staff recommends the Roseboro Downtown Historic District be placed on the state study list under criterion A in the area of commerce. That includes sweet little Roseboro. It is a great effort in their town so far.
So just one little question. It looked like at the intersection, kind of where the bank building was, across from that, from the aerial, was there a park or something that was there?
Like right across from you. Yeah, that's the pink building.
That's where the train tracks.
Yeah.
The town converted it into a small park.
Okay.
There's like, benches and trees and like a little, there's some sort of monument to, I couldn't quite read it.
Well, that's what I saw. It looked like there was a monument with a shadow or something.
Yes, so that's part of the park that the city made.
And the preconception was that the depot would be excluded then?
Yeah, it's especially hard to cross over railroad tracks in historic districts, especially if the tracks are gone. And the depot's been moved. So trying to reach to like that little house I showed you on the other side of the tracks, and there was a car dealership a little ways down. It might be too much of a jump, but the consultant, whoever the town gets, might be able to do a little more research and, provide an argument to say, yes, we want to include these resources. So, yeah. It'll ultimately be up to the consultant and reviewer during that process. Yes.
And just as we talked about earlier, to kind of prevent some of the earlier ways that districts were drawn to exclude different populations, the recommendation going to the folk would be to make sure that they're not excluding out, like, you said, maybe an African-American community.
Yeah, it could have been just, where that one building was. I don't know, it just felt like it could have been part of another little section, but unfortunately across from that, it's all vacant now. I don't know if there were more stores. And that was just that row, that street that wasn't along Roseboro, the main corridor, could have been along West Street and further up. The town really wants to focus on this core right now of commercial area. Because we thought about, well, do you want to just do the whole town, the residential areas and the downtown area? But they're a little fearful of like getting everyone to buy into that. So it's sort of like the idea of, let's do the commercial historic district first. Let everyone see how well that's going, and then perhaps later they could, come back and do a residential area or expand it to be something more than just a commercial area.
But I'm just suggesting
Oh,
that
yes.
commercial, Black folks were doing commercial business, so to be mindful of that, it might be a little bit harder to see, but make the effort to.
We will definitely note that when doing the review process. Yeah.
In the section that you showed, the larger area, and then you showed the green
Mhm.
section that might be brought to that. Is that including the area that Dr. Johnson's talking about?
So the one building that, I haven't done research about the town as far as historically African American. It's just kind of something when we were there, it was sort of just a thought. I don't know if we had anyone on the tour that actually knew. But it was the building with the big arch. It was right here. And so this is all vacant across from it. And that building is actually gone too. It's like recently. So
But that building there is the one you think might be.
yeah, so it is included.
What's the time period here?
We don't really have a suggested period of significance, probably from when the railroad came, and that's when the town started, so 1890, through, I think the application said through the boom era of 1949, but looking at the resources and things that might be extended further than that, it's just something to be explored.
There was one, African American, like a pool hall.
Right.
Place, and that's across the street.
It is.
From the building with the big arch there opening. And when I saw it, we were on the street and I thought, well, that looks like an old building in there. It's all covered up with vinyl. But it kind of also felt like maybe even something like a Masonic hall kind of thing. Yes.
Yeah.
And so I asked one of the guys on the tour with us, and it had been his uncle or something, it'd been somebody in his family. And it was only built in 1970 something, 75. So it wasn't that, it wasn't nearly as old as I thought.
In one more year.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Thank you very much. All right, our last presentation, Mr. Smith. For another cemetery.
We get a lot of questions about cemeteries.
Yeah.
So this is the Pine Forest Cemetery, located in Wilmington. These are the entrance gates looking into the cemetery. Pine Forest Cemetery is a 20-acre African-American burial ground located in the northwest section of Wilmington. Cemetery maintains its original entrance at the north end of North 16th Street. The asphalt entrance drive is flanked by 2 brick pillars which support an arched iron sign displaying the words Pine Forest Cemetery, which it's kind of hard to see, but you can make out the arch right there. Oh, yeah. So just to kind of give us our bearings, these are some location maps. So located in northwestern New Hanover County, Pine Forest Cemetery, again, is situated in the northern part of Wilmington.
delineated by the star here, and it's surrounded by cemeteries. So this undated aerial image on the left and the current data in HPO Web on the right both illustrate the meandering path that guides visitors into and back out of the cemetery. As shown in the map on the right, Pine Forest is adjacent to the historically white cemetery Oakdale, which dates to 1852 and was placed on the study list in 2000 to the north and to the west, right here. The marsh area of Burnt Mill Creek creates parts of the north and northeastern boundary, which is indicated by the wetland icon here. And then the historically white Bellevue Cemetery, which dates to early 1876, borders Pine Forest to the southeast. And finally, the National Register listed Carolina Heights neighborhood borders Pine Forest to the south. This is the cemetery office just inside the entrance gates, and it's really the only main structure, or the only really structure in the cemetery. So this is the main drive, the main entrance drive, which runs north through much of the southern half of the property before splitting at a fork where the paths become gravel and grass and lead to smaller footpaths, mostly made of sand and grass. These paths lead to different sections of burials, drainage ways, some small concrete culverts also function as linear features that divide the landscape. Within these smaller sections, burials are laid east to west, and many family plots are enclosed by various means. However, many graves are not located within a demarcated plot. So you can kind of see there's, low concrete coping here, low brick retaining walls here. So, but there's a lot of delineation of family plots, lots of matured landscape features. As seen in these images, grave markers illustrate the different materials and styles present in the markers. The oldest section of marked graves appears to be toward the northeast section of the cemetery. The earliest marked graves are simple headstone style markers that date to the 1860s. An area to the east border contains burials marked only with wooden crosses, which you can see in the upper right photo. And these slides just illustrate some of the more elaborate markers that date to near the turn of the 20th century. Vegetation throughout the cemetery includes interspersed second growth trees, some of which may have been planted as grave markers. There are also individual and paired boxwoods throughout the cemetery. So in closing, staff recommends the Pine Forest Cemetery is potentially eligible for the National Register at the local level of significance. As Beth so eloquently and adeptly stated, that cemeteries are not typically eligible for listing in the National Register because the cemeteries may embody values beyond personal or family-specific emotions. However, if they meet certain criteria considerations, they can be considered eligible. Because of its distinctive design with roots in this rural cemetery movement, as well as an integral association with the Wilmington coup of 1898, Pine Forest Cemetery meets criteria consideration D, and staff is of the opinion that this resource warrants further study. For these reasons, Pine Forest Cemetery, one of the earliest extant public spaces in Wilmington associated with African-American institutional buildings, is recommended potentially eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places under criterion A in the area of ethnic heritage and social history, with a period of significance, proposed period of significance from circa 1860 to as late as circa 1974. The cemetery is also potentially eligible under criterion C for its local significance as an early and significant representative of a picturesque plan for an African-American cemetery and for the craftsmanship found in the gravestone markers represented within the cemetery. So that is all that I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
The wooden markers, the crosses that were there, do you have a date of when they were placed there? Because they are definitely.
Yeah, I mean, they're most likely replacements.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was a good application. A student, a grad student from Middle Tennessee State University prepared it. So I think it's going to be an ongoing project for her.
Hi, Ellie.
Go ahead.
Any questions? Any more questions?
I was just gonna say, was there any reference to, as you remember, USCT being buried?
Let's see.
Kind of,
There were some individuals of transcendent importance mentioned, but state legislators, aldermen, federal customs agents, attorneys, AME Zion Bishop John H. Shaw, and Dr. Robert Taylor, who was the first African-American architect to graduate from a white architectural program at MIT. And he became a professor of architecture at Tuskegee.
okay.
So, yeah, there's.
He worked on the Roosevelt.
Oh, really?
There may, just as a suggestion for going forward to get, it would be of interest about the USCT, since there is the only national park at the Cameron Museum has an outdoor park that has the that talks about the USCT. So I can't imagine, would not be buried there, but it may be some oral histories. There'll be people to talk to find that out. I think that will also add that significance to.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more information left to be.
There's also there is a national cemetery there that they possibly may be buried in. So,
No, that's true.
all right, are there any other questions? Okay, all right, we now.
If it's, okay, if it's from this period from 1860 to 1974, you should be able to identify a significant number of notable African Americans buried there, even those in World War I, World War II, so on.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think there's a lot left to be learned about the cemetery through ongoing investigation. Yeah.
And Jeff, if I can add, I know many of you are familiar with Find a Grave.
Yeah.
That there is a very large Find a Grave presence with 11,000 memorials listed. If I'm looking at the right one. I think I am.
11,000. I mean, it's 20 acres. So I don't think we saw maybe a fraction of that in the photograph. So,
I think I'm looking at the right. We'll follow up. Right. It's a popular name, but the pictures look the same as what Jeff showed.
but I mean, it's certainly, an important site.
Right, we're now in a position to take a vote. Do I have a motion on Central Regions nomination?
So moved. And that's with the removal of,
Yes, the one that we voted.
we'll defer that further out there. Okay.
And I'll second that.
Right, is there a second?
I second.
Second?
No.
And the motion was by Mayor Clark.
Yes, Mayor Clark made the motion. Dr. Denard seconded. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Okay, we have a few more, just a couple more things, and I don't feel bad about keeping you after class. One of the couple things. First, I appreciate your attendance today. I appreciate your paying attention and really being on task. We need to thank some people. The gentleman who brought in a brand new screen for us this morning. And on a short notice, and he had to do some behind the scenes to keep that screen and everything else working, to keep it out on YouTube. Matt
Zaire.
Matt
Y'all have
Zaire.
seen that
Yeah.
before.
And also I'd like to thank Sharon Hope for two things, for our good food and for this.
Yeah.
Please, she's the one who figured out how we could get a parking pass. I've been coming here to meetings at the archives for over 40 some years. And this is the first meeting I ever got without having to send my parking pass in to be reimbursed for. Hope you all have a safe trip home, and we will see you in June.
Thank you. Thank you.
But Oscar Hokie.
2 hours.
Just fill it out and hand it back to him, I guess. And then we got that.
That was an amazing question. I had an amazing question.